Hey, before we get started, I just want to let you know that if you are taking steps towards a more joyful or authentic version of your business, or you're creating a business to reflect more of your authentic self, then you'll want the support of my audio course. You can actually listen to the first module of my audio course now for free. Just jump in the show notes to click the link to find out how. We are turning your inspiration into aligned action. I'm Barcy, your host. Now is your time to answer the call, to let it be easy, and to trust what feels good. I'll be sharing my framework from my signature intuitive creators method to guide you back to your most empowered and aligned self, your boss goddess self. Are you ready to do it differently? Hi, and welcome back. This is Barcy, your host. And we have a guest for you today. Her name is Katie Soul, and she's the creator of Mystical Living and its courses and programs. And she also has a line of clothing called Love Lillett. And I'll link to her website so you can find her work there. And she actually included for us a 30% discount to her program, which you'll find in the show notes. So you'll just click the code or type in the code that I will enter in the show notes for you. And then you get 30% off her program, which was so sweet. So if you enjoy the conversation that her and I have today, I definitely recommend exploring more. So what are we talking about today? At the core of today's conversation is how to cultivate that trust and that confidence so that you can begin to trust your intuition and begin to align your life with your truth. Katie left her Fortune 100 corporate title to build her own legacy after realizing that her legacy was not going to be realized if she stayed working in corporate. She has a really great way of sharing practical tools for ways that you can begin to shift these things in easy and small ways in your daily life. And it doesn't require you to quit your job. They're just tools that you can use to kind of get more connected with your own trust, truth, confidence, your own light, basically. And be sure to listen for moments for those tools because they are actually threaded throughout this whole episode. She drops lots of fun, practical things that you can try right away. They're very easy to do. One of my favorites that she shares, she calls shedding the shit. That one is great. So listen for that. And then towards the end, she shares a story about how she met Richard Branson and took a trip to his island only to manifest a workshop with him that would follow thereafter. So a big theme of our conversation today is all about what is needed to actually create that container that's required for our manifestations to be sustainable, and how the law of resonance is what actually comes before the law of attraction. This is something I talk about often here, and in fact, episode 153 is all about this. It's all about resonance. It's kind of all I'm talking about this whole season. If you really are capturing the essence of what I want you to walk away with here. It's at the core of what I want you to get clear on this season of the podcast. And Katie explains this really well and really simply. So listen for how to create resonance with our truths. This is what my audio course is designed to help with. This is what I'm talking about. How to build the muscle of self-trust so we have the confidence to then trust our intuition, trust those moments that we hear from our deeper selves. And then how can we begin to build our legacies when we lean into this trust? And how you might get to hang out with Richard Branson on his island if you choose to surrender and allow in more than you can even imagine for yourself. So just a really fun story at the end that is really just about how we can let go of this very sort of linear, narrow vision we might have for ourselves sometimes that we try to quote unquote bring in or attract or manifest, and instead sort of allow a looser grip on those moments and surrender to something that might come in even bigger than we could ever imagine. And the Richard Branson story is basically a great example of that Katie shares at the end. So be sure to listen to the end. All right. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Katie Soul. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me, Barcy. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
I think you have a really interesting journey, and I would love to know a little bit about your leadership background and your story and kind of what led you to what you're doing now.
Awesome. So the way I would describe it is, for most of my life, I was really leading a double life. By day, I was a Fortune 100 executive at the same organization that I started with right out of college and climbed the ladder quite quickly. And by night, or all of my time outside of work, I was exploring the mysteries of the universe, studying spirituality, religion, going on pilgrimages to sacred sites. And there were moments when I would weave those two things together. I might teach my corporate team quantum spoon bending or lead them in a meditation, and had a lot of fun weaving my passion into my work.
Wow.
Until one day, it just felt like it was time to take my passion in a more legacy-driven direction. And that really sparked through a conversation I had with one of my former colleagues who was describing our corporate culture to me. And he said, "Katie, it's like a box, and you have to fit in the box to be successful here. Every level you go up, the box gets smaller and the box gets smaller and the box gets smaller." He's doing this whole thing with his hands, showing me the smaller and smaller boxes. And it was that moment that the light bulb really went off for me, because he was perfectly describing how I felt within the confines of the structure that I was working in, like a smaller and smaller and smaller version of myself. And I felt less empowered with each level I grew to use my voice. And that was really the tipping point for me. That conversation took place about a year before I left corporate America. So it took me a few more minutes to build the muscle of self-trust to finally make that leap.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like so many of us can relate to moments like that, where we're like, someone gives us this visual and we're like, wow, that is how I feel. And I could feel the boxes too in those moments of my life where you feel constricted and you're trying to figure out, how you got there or why, or what's next, or what to do about it. But before we move on, because I want to know more I have so many questions about your journey, but what is spoon bending? I've never heard of that.
Oh my gosh. So when we think about the quantum field, it's like really esoteric and confusing, right? Because you're like, what is the quantum field anyway? So we use a spoon or a fork as a way to demonstrate how the quantum field works. So what you're doing is you're taking a spoon or a fork, or you could do it with a knife, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay.
But the forks can be fun because they have the little prongs on them. And when you start, you try and bend it. Everyone in the room tries to bend it, and you realize you can't, right? Because it's really hard to bend a spoon. But through different techniques, some of it's spinning, some of it's you can do a prayer. There's different ways that you can start to relax a point on the metal. So that point is really showing you what it's like in the quantum field, how malleable everything is in that space. And when you do this, then you can bend the spoon with ease, like it's no big deal. And it's really helpful to understand some of the concepts like manifestation and how quickly you can change the energy of something that's deeply esoteric. I think that's one of my magical superpowers, is because I grew up in this corporate background, I really like to ground the mystical into reality. And so often I would learn from spiritual teachers who it was so esoteric that I didn't always fully understand what they were talking about, and I couldn't repeat it. So in the work that I do today, I always want to make sure it's repeatable and it's understandable. And so I'll use techniques like that just to help people to understand, okay, like now let's take this esoteric concept of the quantum field and ground it into reality with something like a spoon. And what's so cool is every class I've ever taught everybody bends by the end, which is so cool. And sometimes a different technique will resonate more with somebody. So we might go through 5 to 7 different techniques in a course. It's not something I do professionally, so don't knock on my door for quantum spoon bending, but you can definitely YouTube it and find all sorts of different techniques out there.
That's so interesting. And yes, I totally get that this isn't like a service you offer, but I feel like I would be remiss as a host to not point that out as something that we should
It's
explore.
So cool. And really, I mean, everyone should try it. I'm sure there's great content on YouTube and you can explore it there.
That's so interesting. So one last question about that, just so that we're clear.
Totally.
Is it the techniques that you're using, is the bending of the spoon something that you end up being able to do physically more easily through these techniques? Or is it about finding the point in the spoon that is bendable? Does that make sense?
No, you're really creating a malleability in a point in the spoon.
So we're helping create this.
Yeah, so you're softening the metal
Wow.
in the quantum field, which is so cool.
Wow.
And versus finding a point in the spoon that's bendable. So really, you can focus on any point within the spoon, or actually the forks are really fun because you can make some fun shapes by bending the prongs on the ends of the forks too.
Wow. Okay. So I know what I'll be doing later tonight.
Totally. You should definitely try it. And it's really fun to do with kids too. When I first taught my kids how to do it, kids will bend so quickly.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing.
That makes sense.
Because they just don't have the same limiting beliefs around it that we as adults sometimes tend to have.
Yeah, magic is still way more accessible, I think, in our belief system for sure. Not to say that this is magic, but just through the eyes of a child. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's just a really fun way to kind of explore.
It's so fun.
And then my second question that popped up while you were sharing that part of your story was that as someone who is working with those in Fortune 100 companies and in corporate and whatnot, how are you able to bring in that as a technique? Was that, and then also I'm curious, like what was your pitch, and like what did you tell them it would start? Like how is this serving them to better something in their job, career, team, whatever it may be?
That's a great question. And I really believe the new paradigm of leadership that we're stepping into needs to be more conscious, needs to be more open-minded. And I was really doing these practices under the radar. So as we talked about the boxes getting smaller, as I rose in my career, there were thousands of direct reports. It was hard to do those things under the radar as time went on. And so that is one challenge that ultimately led to my making a change, because it was no longer in resonance. I couldn't be the leader that I wanted to be at that point in time in that organization. And I do believe we really need light leaders in corporate settings. And I serve a lot of light leaders in my corporate program, so they can go back out into the world, the ones that choose to, and serve in those pockets. And with my team, my smaller teams, the ones that reported directly to me, I would always be pushing the boundaries of what was possible, because when we did things in a linear way, when we hustled and we grinded and we did things in the traditional way in corporate America, it's slow. It's a slog fest. It's not really that much fun. But when we bring magic in and we can accelerate timelines, we can time bend, we can learn new techniques, we can be happier and healthier through these techniques, we can raise our vibration. It just makes the whole workplace much more fun. So I tended to be the leader that everybody wanted to work for, because my teams had more fun. It was more open-minded, and I probably also attracted that population because people who had that sort of inner knowing, like, ooh, what's going on over there? And I had a lot of loyalists in corporate America who would follow me from country to country, to team, and always just wanted to be a part of that energy. And in corporate, I really was an entrepreneur. So I would go to all the startups that we were doing, and that was my area of expertise. And so people would come and play with me, and then we'd go off and we'd do something new, and they'd come to that. And we had a lot of fun. I really have a lot of great memories from my time in corporate America. It just got to a point where it wasn't the legacy that I was destined to create.
Yeah. And well, firstly, like, amazing that you found space to live in that fun, joyful energy and then share that with the others there. And once you added the fact that you worked with entrepreneurs, for me as an entrepreneur, that clicks. It's like, okay, that makes sense. We're all about innovation and trying to be creative and keep that energy going, even though we get very burnt out too. But it's about that, finding all of that joy and staying in that alignment and all that good stuff. So it's cool to hear you play in that way in a corporate setting and to find space for that and that there's that alignment where people were following you and being attracted, and that attraction law of people and energy. And I'm glad that existed.
And I think what's really cool and fascinating is I got the ping towards the end of when I was leaving. I kept getting this message that you can have more impact outside than in. And I truly believe that I am impacting the organization I used to work for more now than I did from inside, because I can see my Instagram followers. I can hear from them that listen to my podcast. They come into my group coaching program. And so I think that's so super duper cool, is that sometimes we think, oh, like, I'm deserting this population, but actually what I learned is I wasn't deserting them at all. I was actually amplifying the organization from afar, which is a really interesting pivot that I can now see that impact 18 months after leaving corporate.
Wow. Yes, we're going to talk more about that for sure, because I think that is something you can only gain through hindsight. Maybe not only, but it's much easier to see in hindsight in some form of wider view. But let's get back to that point in time where you decided that you wanted to build a bigger legacy. And I like that language around like, what is my legacy? We talk about purpose a lot, but I think about it in relationship to legacy as well. And I would love to hear more about that revelation and what it looked like to take those steps.
Yeah. So the way I think about it is we all come up in with these maps. We have astrology and human design and gene keys and the cards of destiny. We know what we loved as a child when we were like really tapped in. We know what our dreams are. And when we triangulate all of those together, we get a clear picture of like who we're really meant to be. And I actually do that work in my group program because I want everyone to leave with a purpose statement. And we do this little ad lib. And it's my purpose is blank in order to blank. So for me personally, my purpose is to snap people out of their minds where the human self resides with the fears and the worries and the to-do lists, and bring them into their heart in order to experience higher states of bliss, ecstasy, and joy. Because when we're in our heart, that's when we're connected to our divine self, when we're connected to our intuition. And the real magic is, then we get to take that elevator ride back up into the mind and take aligned action from our heart space, not from the mind that has the fears and the worries and the to-do list, but from the mind that's aligned and calibrated with the heart. So for me, that's really fundamental in getting clear on your purpose. And when I would do an astrology reading or look at my gene keys, everything pointed to, oh my gosh, you're a spiritual teacher. And so that was pinging at me for decades before I stepped into that role. So we also have to work to build the muscles. When I was working in corporate America, having an astrologer tell me that really your chart is you're supposed to be a spiritual teacher, felt like, what? I don't know what to make of that. Yes, that's true. I'm really into all of that. But actually, like, that being my job, it was too hard for me to fathom. So I really had to work on building the muscles. And that's what I work with my clients on now, is we build the muscles in small ways. So then eventually we have the self-trust that we can leap into our divine destiny.
Yeah. And I feel like my journey is very similar, and I talk about it a lot lately because I'm just coming out of the realization and shifting of it too. And it took someone on my podcast sharing with me how out of alignment I was, which was so fascinating. Oh. And you can listen to it if you like. It's a whole episode about this. So it was kind of interesting to experience it, in real time with all of you, with everyone, and then take the steps to figure it out. But it took me a couple of years. So it takes time to hear it, digest it, internalize it, realize it, and then you recycle that. For me, I had to recycle this process many times and take a step and then cycle that and then take a step and cycle that. And then eventually you emerge as something pretty different than where you were in that moment, right? Like it's interesting, but it's still pretty fast if you think about it. 1 year, 2 years is not that much to completely change your life.
Totally. I do say though, being on the outside, it's like a month on the outside is like a year in so many ways. So it feels like I've lived like a good 18 years in the past 18 months of journeying. Yeah. But just taking that one step at a time and building the muscle of self-trust is the way, because we don't just wake up one day and pivot. I don't know anyone that's really been able to do it quite like that.
Right. I agree. And I think trust is key as well. I think it is the answer to finding our purpose, to moving into to take action in relationship to the purpose and intuition that we start to communicate with. And the trust is the foundational piece, right?
Totally. And for me, I always thought about it as, what if I don't do this? What's that going to feel like? And for me, that was the scariest thing ever, to feel like I didn't play full out, that I didn't leave it all on the field, that I held back my superpowers and my gifts. And now 18 months into this journey, certainly, it hasn't been a straight line upwards. It's been like up and down and figuring it out and testing and trialing. And I would never change it for a minute. It's been so life-giving, because when you're in your purpose, when you're in your life's work, everything else just flows in a way that I've never experienced before. But coming into that full alignment, then the universe is like, oh, hey, what about this? Or, you could speak on this stage, or go have this experience with this person. And the amount of miracles I've experienced since taking that leap of faith has been really amazing.
I love that. Yes, the doors just start opening, ones that you wouldn't have even imagined, right? It's like...
Totally. Like we didn't know each other a month ago.
Right.
And now you'll be on my podcast, I'm on your podcast, and there wasn't any manifesting that. There wasn't any putting your face on a vision board. It just happened. It was just in alignment.
Yeah, for me, podcasting is a beautiful portal for alignment, specifically, that I haven't shared this phrasing before anywhere. But
share it.
But it's true. I've talked about how my guests started showing up, that ones that I needed to hear messages from, and they thought that I was helping them, but really they were changing my life. And there's a whole season of these people, and I don't know why they all came at the same time, and they just transformed how I showed up, and the conversations that I started to have really changed. And you're a good testament to that alignment as well, where I didn't have to go find you. Yeah. And you didn't have to go find me. In fact, someone else did that for both of us.
I know.
Who was also a guest on my show. And so it just becomes this like momentous thing. Yeah. But I'll be honest with you. Originally, I was really afraid to take those guests on because they were so different than what I was doing at the time. But I was like, there's something here that there's something about this. And it was people that were like channelers, one identified as a witch, one person, what else, totally left her job and had this whole journey she really, really needed to share. And like, there were these things that they were like, I just need to share this on your show. And it was very specific. And it was maybe like 8 people. It was really interesting. Wow. And it just changed everything. And I had to ask myself what my boundaries were and why, and let some of those go. And they became the most popular episodes as well. Like the downloads went up and it just shifted everything. And now we have this podcast, which is more in alignment with those types of conversations too. And it just helped me step into myself more, like what you're sharing about your journey too. So, it's like this lovely energy expansion that I think platforms like this give us. So that's my rant.
I loved it.
Thank you.
It was great.
I did have a question around what you just shared, actually, which, first of all, 18 months doesn't sound like a long time. But like you did say, when you're doing this kind of work intentionally every day, it does speed up time in the way that we grow. But I'd love to know, what helped you navigate? Were there certain tools that helped you navigate that you would like come back to guide you through moments like that?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. And I think really practical advice for everyone listening too. So, and I'll share a few that I use personally and I also use with my clients. And the first one is a love list. So in my group program, everyone has a journal and it's called the Mystical Living Love List.
Beautiful.
And we use that journal only to write in about things that we love about ourselves. And we use it 5 minutes a day. And it can just be really simple at the end of the day. I love that I went and picked my kids up at school today. I love that the way that I put my body lotion on and I really treasured in those few minutes of caressing my skin, whatever it might be. I love that I made a nourishing meal for myself today. And again, it's something that we're building evidence with ourselves of how we're showing up and how we're loving ourselves. And when you're in a moment that you feel a little slumpy, you can go and you can open your love list and read, and it pretty instantaneously will shift your entire state because you're reading all of this juicy love that you've written about yourself. And then it helps you snap back in and be like, oh my gosh, I am a rock star. And I love that practice. I use it in my group program and myself. And the second one that I do is, I talk about it like this, as shedding the shit. Because when our energetic containers get overstuffed, it's like, when your laundry bin is overflowing and spilling out into the ground. It's not the best energy, right? Well, the same thing happens to us. Sometimes we just put in and put in and put in, and we don't release. And so I do this work in my own life and with my clients is we go through a constant practice of shedding the shit. Because when we calendarize it and we kind of make it into our daily routine, then it's easier to keep up with. You're not then one day shedding all your limiting beliefs and household items and bad habits. You're just doing it gradually and you're building that muscle. I use the example of building the muscle a lot because I think about this work like going to the gym. Mm-hmm. You go to the gym for a few reasons. One, you want to get stronger. Two, you might hire a trainer because you need accountability or have a gym membership for accountability. And 3, to learn something new. And this work is the same as going to the gym. You're just building new muscles. You're rewiring new neural pathways in your brain. So one fun thing I'll share with your listeners is we go through this process called the 3-day shed in my group program. And I like to recommend to do this maybe once a quarter. And you do this for some of the bigger things in your life, more like habits, limiting beliefs. And you set a timer for 20 minutes. And you're going to do this for 3 days in a row. And you write a question to yourself at the top of the piece of paper on day 1. And you say, what is it that is holding me back that I need to shed? And you trust exactly what comes up. Often people are going into this exercise thinking, oh, I'm going to shed this thing, but then something entirely different comes up. But you go with what comes up and you write for 20 minutes. It's called automatic writing. It's a great way to tap into your psychic superpowers because we all have these innate psychic superpowers. Some of us have just built the muscle a little bit stronger. Automatic writing is a very, very easy and quick way to tap into your own intuition. And you just write. You don't let the pen leave the paper for 20 minutes. And then at the end, you perform a little ritual and you burn that paper and you say, I release whatever it is, limiting beliefs, habits, with finality. And I receive in the new. Or, you come up with a little mantra that feels right to you. And then you do it day 2 and day 3. Usually by day 3, you're actually writing all this beautiful gratitude writing is typically what happens because on day 1 and day 2, you've moved through so much. And by day 3, typically people are like seeing the beauty and the joy in what they needed to release and have a deeper understanding of the why behind it. So that's another practical one that I love to use when I'm getting a little bit stuck or I find myself getting in my own way. I just take the time to shed. And the third one I would say is just go to your underwear drawer and pull out the dirty underwear that has like holes or just is like kind of grimy. And that alone just shifts a lot of energy because often it's the first thing you're putting on your body. And if you have something dingy that you're putting on your body, that sets an energetic tone for your whole day.
Wow.
Now, remember, I did grow up in the fashion industry, so fashion is still a really important aspect of my life. So just setting the tone for your day and putting on something that's beautiful, even if you're the only person that can see it, is a really great self-care practice too. So those are 3 sort of practical things that I love to do in my own life and share with my clients too.
I love that. I love that last one. I've never heard anyone coach on that, but it makes perfect sense. And right, we didn't discuss that your background is in the fashion industry and you have lots of beautiful things that you've created as an artist in the fashion industry too. So people should check. We'll put links for that too so they can see it. But I'd love to learn, go ahead and share what your program is because we're talking about it a little bit. So let's talk a little bit more about it so that they understand what it is exactly they can sign up for.
Awesome. Also, we have a code called podcast for 30% off the program too. So you're welcome to share that with your listeners
Wonderful.
too.
Thank you.
So since leaving corporate America, I ran a bunch of courses and got lots of learnings and feedback. And because I have this innate magic of bridging the mystical and the corporate into this concrete way of doing things, it's a little different in how I ground it into reality, was getting great results. But my clients were saying, we just want more high touch. And it really made a lot of sense to me because a course isn't always enough when we're creating really big changes in our life. We actually need hands-on support. Yeah. So I decided that my legacy work over the next few years would be a program, and it's called the Mystical Living Group Program, and it's 8 weeks to accelerated change. It's incredibly high touch. We have weekly group coaching and a daily Instagram group. And it's working so incredibly beautifully, this high touch support. So the teachings are things I've always taught. So the modules are about shedding the shit and understanding your purpose, conquering imposter syndrome, creating inner and outer radiance. We do some work around your home as a station of abundance. And then at the very, very end, we do some work on manifestation. Everyone wants to do that first because it's like sexy and fun. But really what everyone realizes is by the end of the course is manifestation is really consciousness alchemizing energy into form. And when we're playing with that kind of high magic and really getting clear on where we're going with our manifestations, we need structured containers to hold the manifestation. Often when people come into the group program, they don't have a structured container. And I didn't either. So I think of it sort of like a leaky colander. So maybe you're able to manifest really easily. Maybe you can manifest money, but then it just leaks out of the colander. So before we can get to manifesting, we need to create a really strong structured container so that you can hold your manifestations in that container. So the work really builds on that as we go. And I do tend to attract a population that is keen to make bigger changes in their lives, like leaving relationships or jobs that are no longer in alignment. But we don't start there. We start on making small changes to build the muscle and develop our compassion and our self-trust, because intuition typically comes pretty easily for people who are attracted to my work. They actually know, they're very tapped in, they know what they're supposed to do, or they're guided to, or they're getting the signs. Where they need the support, and where I needed the support in my own life, was actually building the muscle of self-trust so that I had the confidence to trust my intuition. And the results are really beautiful and incredible. We'll be sharing, we have a cohort going right now, and we'll be sharing some stories really soon. So check out the Instagram and the website.
Wonderful.
I'm sure we'll have it in the show notes too.
Yeah.
And the changes are really remarkable. I have a client right now in my group program, and she manages a McDonald's, and she just is new to this space and really is ready just to have more passion and purpose in her life. And 3 weeks in, she started writing the most beautiful poetry I have ever heard. And it was something she didn't even know she had this superpower within her. And her poems literally will bring you to tears. It's so beautiful. And I can't wait for her to birth that into the world. So the changes are really remarkable. 2 people have already shared that they're leaving their corporate jobs in this cohort and have talked to their employers and created a nice exit plan. And it's just, it's just so cool to watch women step into their purpose. And while you don't always have to leave your corporate job to step into your purpose, coming into alignment with your truth, knowing who you are and what legacy you want to create in this world is how we really create a new reality for everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing all of that. It's so beautiful. I can feel like the lightness of those stories and the people that are showing up for this change and transformation in themselves. And I actually was wondering, I'm glad you just shared that, you don't have to leave your job, because I know there are people out there that maybe love their job and
totally
aren't feeling, are stuck between understanding the difference between needing to leave, like, and still come into their highest selves, if you will.
Totally.
What does that look like? Like how can they work with themselves in that capacity?
I think the real pivot point is taking self-responsibility and coming to that point in your life where you have an understanding that nobody outside of you is going to come in and like sweep you off your feet and solve it all. This work is an inside job. And when you come to that point where you're really ready to be like, you know what, let's do this. Like, I want change. I want to get stronger. I want to create a different reality. Then you're ripe for a program like this. And the outcomes can be quite surprising when you begin to delve into this work, because when we're doing this work, we also want to make sure it's calibrated with our nervous system. And people have different comforts in their nervous system of what feels good. Not everyone is built to be an entrepreneur. And I don't recommend that everyone go out and be an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur it's like a whole different energetic signature. And it's not great for everyone's nervous system. So we really have to understand that as we're doing this work together is, what can your nervous system hold? Some people like love the stability and the steady paycheck and showing up from 9 to 5 and having consistency in their lives. Somebody who really loves that, I'm not going to say leave corporate America. Actually, I never tell anybody to leave. It's all from within. And they start to just build those muscles, understand themselves better so that they know what do they have the tolerance for, what feels good to their nervous system, what makes them feel like, oh my gosh, too much, too fast. We really try, even though it's an 8-week program, some students will stay in the group coaching in the Instagram group longer. We do have a way that you can stay on a monthly basis, because some people, it'll take a year to really create the change that they're looking for in their lives. And that way they can have that continual support at a discounted rate.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was going to ask, and you answered my question, if there's something after, because I know what that transformation can be like when you get the information and then you have to work with that information, and it takes time.
Totally.
Yeah, to process.
And what's interesting is when I did a big survey of clients and people that were interested in my work, but weren't yet clients, and just people that were complete strangers, to really understand like what was it that they were looking for. It came back really clear. 8 weeks was the tolerance that people had. But what's interesting is then once they're in the work and they understand it and they're having all these ahas and they're getting the support, then they begin to understand, oh, I see. I want to invest in this for a longer period of time. But to get in the door, to create change, 8 weeks, knowing that you can do something in 8 weeks, and they do. I mean, the transformations in 8 weeks, it is accelerated. It is unbelievable. And often once they're through the 8 weeks, they realize like, ooh, a lot is happening. I want to continue that support, because often when we try the DIY approach and we try to do it alone, then we're like watching a reel from this person and some YouTube from this, and then listening to a podcast, and we get a little discombobulated and overwhelmed. Yeah. So having a framework that builds upon each other can be really helpful, whether it's through my program or somebody else. I would highly recommend finding a coach, a mentor that you can grow with, that feels in alignment, and somebody that you know, I don't have to listen to everything this person says. I'm really big on that concept, because what we're doing is we're building your muscle of self-trust. That's not always going to be in alignment with everything I say. I love it when somebody in one of my programs pushes back or says like, I just don't feel the resonance with this right now. That's great, because that is the magic. Yeah. That's when they're building their own self-trust. I would love if more people did that, because that is really where we're going. It's this movement from external validation and all of these things outside of ourselves into internal nourishment. And even last week in our group coaching, one of my clients said, she said, I want to get it right so badly. And that's just her wiring.
Yeah.
And what we were working through, there wasn't a right answer. There wasn't a right or a wrong. There were many rights. And we got to have a beautiful conversation about that wiring and why her body wants to be the good girl, she wants to be the A student, wants to say the right thing. Because then the rest of the group got to hear that too. And there was a lot of resonance in how that was landing for other people. And that's one of the magics when you have a group program is there's all this like cross-pollination happening. And often it's the person who was like scared to speak, who was like, I didn't really want to say that, that actually has the most impact on the whole group because they're sharing something that's in some way connected a little bit to everybody else in the group. So we were able to break down some real barriers in last week's session around this topic of wanting to be the good girl, wanting to get it right, wanting to get the good grade. And that's part of the deconstruction that we have to go through when we've, society and the world has been placing all of these accolades and promotions and external validation metrics upon us. We have to change the wiring.
Yeah. So all that said, I would love to ask, what is your definition for success?
So I would say it probably ties back to my life motto. My life motto is follow your light, because what lights you up lights up the world. When we follow our truth, that's when we create impact. That's when we create legacy. That's when we create change in the world. And sometimes we make it overly complicated, but the things that light us up, there's a reason we're meant to lean into those things, because that's where we are sparked. That's where we feel most alive. And I think it's like so freaking cool. Now I run this group program. I run a podcast that's all about exploring the mysteries of the universe and elevating women and helping and being a way shower to find your purpose. Like, my life is so amazing, and I pilgrimage to sacred sites and design clothes. And 18 months ago, I worked in corporate America. So a lot can change when we build those muscles of self-trust.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks for asking.
Oh, absolutely.
What's yours?
I resonate with what you're sharing, and great. Thanks for asking me. I would say, yes, it's absolutely about leaning in and trust, coming back to that foundational place. And I would also add that, to me, I talk about fulfillment in that construct as well, and understanding how to link fulfillment to those inner desires that we may have shamed or made untrue or unviable, or, those parts of us that we're told are not as important as the things that, society validates. Or to me, it really comes back to that often of going, does this bring me my fulfillment, and what does that look like? And oftentimes it's the resounding word that I come back to often is freedom.
Me too.
Yeah. And for me, freedom means being able to express my truth in any way that I feel is guided and needed. And I change that expression often. So it's part of who I am, and constantly needing to come back to it and make it valid and worthy and okay and part of my fulfillment process. And to me, whenever I'm being true to that equals success for me.
I love it. That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
The other thing too that's pinging in for me, and I talk about this a lot in my work, is Often when clients come into my world, they're in the know on a lot of spiritual practices, and they've created vision boards, they've tried different manifestation techniques, and they're not really getting where they want to go. And what's so interesting is it's often because they're not in alignment with their truth, and they're forcing things that are very linear and narrow. And by the end of our work together, they really have dismantled that concept of traditional linear manifestation. And we move to this more high magic form of manifestation that's about being in alignment with our truth and being open to the possibilities that the universe has in store for us versus forcing a specific manifestation. Because when we do that, we limit ourselves. We block ourselves from our highest potential. And I have so much evidence of this in my own life, just the things that have come in. Do you want me to share a fun story?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. This is such a great example. Last March, I was hanging out with my friend Ellie on a Zoom call, and we're just catching up. And Ellie helps people write their books. And she has this strategy, this formula that she uses. You write the book, but she just helps you get organized. And I said, Ellie, someday I'm going to write a book with you. And she said, why would you wait, Katie? Why wouldn't you do it now? I said, I don't know. I just left corporate America a hot minute ago. I'm not sure I'm ready to write a book. And she said, I think you are. And by the end of the call, she had convinced me. She's like, well, I have a book writing retreat in August. Why don't you come out? She lives in Laguna Beach. Come out and do that. And I said, well, Ellie, you just convinced me. I want to write a book now. I don't want to wait till August.
Oh.
So she's like, well, when could you come? Now, Ellie travels the world all the time. She's always on the road. And I said, well, my kids have a school vacation in 2 weeks, and they're going on a trip with their grandma. And could I come in 2 weeks? And she said, you won't believe this, but I'm actually home. I'm having a surgery. Yes, you can come. I'll just be sitting on the couch, but it'll be perfect. So I fly out 2 weeks later. I write my book in a week. It was an incredible experience. Wow. And it just channeled right through. And then as I'm getting ready to leave, I'm walking through this room in Ellie's house. She has all these pictures of people that she's met along the years, a lot of celebrities and really interesting leaders. And there's a picture of her with Richard Branson. And I say, hey, Ellie, when did you meet Richard Branson? She said, oh, Katie, Richard and I are friends, because she does a lot of pro bono work in the BVI. I was like, wow, that's so cool. And then she said, well, actually, I'm going to see him in a couple months. Do you want to come with me? And I end up coming with her, hanging out on Necker Island with Richard Branson. One morning over breakfast, we're talking about dyslexia, because both of my kids are dyslexic, and I am probably undiagnosed to some degree dyslexic. Richard Branson's dyslexic. And I said, Richard, have you done anything with dyslexia? He said, no, we really haven't. We haven't done any summits or any work around that. Of course, they're involved in different groups, but they've never really hosted anything with that theme. I was like, oh, that'd be so cool. By the end of the breakfast, he's got his team involved, and they're planning out this dyslexia summit the next summer, so this summer coming up, on Necker Island. And a couple weeks ago, his team reached out and they said, Katie, we're doing it. It's really happening. Can you come? Can you bring your kids? It's in July. And I just share that story because nowhere on a vision board did I have this picture of Richard Branson. He wasn't in my field of awareness. This experience wasn't. And now, I've been able to connect my kids' school with him. Just the whole thing has really spiraled into this beautiful co-creation with the universe. And had I been so focused on linear manifestation and I want this, I want to do this, I would have missed this whole possibility that the universe just wanted to land in my lap. And so I am really different from most spiritual teachers in that regard, as I do not teach linear manifestation practices.
It's a great story. Thanks for sharing that. It's such a good example of how to open up to things that are put into our purview and say, well, what if I said yes to this? And then see how that feels. And if it's a go, then you just actually go do it is, I feel like, the key, right? It's to like see if it feels like a yes and then to do it.
Exactly. Like, does it light me up is the question I always ask.
Yeah. That's really cool. And I agree. And I struggle with, if I'm being honest, I struggle between opening up and when it's something that feels like a real need. It's like, how do I have a looser grip on this need? Feels less like a desire and more like something I need right now. And like understanding how to loosen the need grip on my manifesting or meditation or whatever, and like opening up to like the ease that I call it ease, and allowing for more to show up. And it can get difficult at times. So I just want to point that out for those of you that are like, I try to do that, but it's hard. Sometimes it is.
Yeah. And one trick I kind of teach, two tricks really I'll share, is one, we hear so much about the law of attraction and, we attract these things into our field. And that is true. And what comes before the law of attraction is the law of resonance or the law of vibration. It's kind of interchanged between both of those, vibration or resonance. And really, that's where I focus on with my teachings, is it's really about becoming an energetic match so that we can be in resonance with that which we desire. So then the law of attraction can work and things can just magnetize into our field. But if we're in resonance with lack and repeating limiting beliefs and patterns that don't serve us, that's what we're going to attract. When we're in resonance with our truth and our divine destiny and following our light, then we're going to attract experiences that connect there. So one thing that I do with my clients is just a really quick and easy one to build awareness, is when that fear or lack mentality comes in, you say out loud, I cancel and I choose the opposite. And you just repeat that little mantra to yourself, because you're just flipping your energetic state. You're just becoming aware of it. And it's a quick thing that can be quite empowering to do, because instead of just getting yourself in a spiral of like more worry and lack, you're pattern disrupting and you're teaching yourself, okay, we don't do that anymore. Now we cancel and we choose the opposite. And it's just a quick way to shift your energetic state.
Love that. I love simple things like that. I think words have tons of power. They are frequencies as well. And they are hugely frequent, like how we bring things in. So thank you for that. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, it's a great one. I share it sometimes on Instagram, and it's always like, I'll get DMs after and be like, oh my gosh, I've been doing it, Katie, and it really works. And it does. It's just a quick little one, and people remember it. I try to do things that are like catchy, like shed the shit, cancel and choose the opposite, just to help
the habits
to remember.
Yeah, I love that. I love giving small, easy tools. That used to be everything that I would. My whole first season of my podcast was all about that. So it's just how can we change our habits it's so basic, but it is truly, like you said, what builds the muscle and shifts things. So thank you for that.
And, at the end of the day, manifestation works on detachment, not attachment. And so often when we like grip so tight is what we all want to do. Like, I want that specific thing to happen. We actually create more distance between us and that specific thing, because we're just like, we want to just bear hug it and hold on and grip it. And unfortunately, manifestation works by detaching, by surrendering, by letting go. And that's where the best magic happens, because often that thing we're trying to bear hug isn't actually in our highest good, and something even better can come in.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that is a very key point to getting it to click and getting it to kind of come in easily. And I've had things come in like the second later that I make this shift, like within seconds. And it's amazing. It's the things I'm most grateful for in my life now came in those ways, like the house I live in and my now husband and my kitty cat, like the things I love.
Oh my gosh.
How can everyone find you?
Great. So katiesol.com, Katie, KATIESOL.com is a great pathway in. And then you can find me on Instagram at mystic.katie.soul. Oh, and my website, we have another website, mysticalliving.co. And that's where my clothing line is, our online marketplace for products, all from female entrepreneurs.
This was so much fun, Katie. Thank you so much for joining me and having such a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. You are truly a treasure.
Thank you for listening to the Boss Goddess podcast. And if you're taking steps towards a more joyful or authentic version of your business, or creating a business to reflect more of your authentic self, then you'll want the support of my audio course. It's now called Permission Granted: Stop Sacrificing for Success and Start Unlocking Your Unique Path of Genius. And it is now only $37. And now you can also preview the first module of my audio course for free. Just click the link in the show notes to access your free preview right away, or to buy the audio course for just $37.